Hello everyone, we are here to discuss two recent releases. Those are Amazing Spider-Man 2 and X-Men Days of Future Past. We're going to start with Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now I should note that we didn't just get back from the movie, we saw it opening night and we haven't seen it since, and that was about 2-3 weeks ago.
Something like that,
So we're mostly going from memory here, but this movie has been discussed at length, so we're just gonna take it from there.
Okay.
And
so
we saw X-Men Days of Future Past
a couple of days ago. Yeah.
So that's gonna be more fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
So Amazing Spider-Man 2. What do we think?
Well, as far as all the 5 Spider-Man theatrical movies we got, I'd rank this maybe third. After third, maybe fourth. I still haven't decided if I like Amazing Spider-Man 1.
The first Spider-Man hasn't aged all that well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would have liked it if we didn't have to sit through the whole origin story again. But the good news is that in Amazing Spider-Man 2, we don't have to sit through the whole origin story again, which is nice. I think the other Spider-Man movie that this, and it's not, and Amazing Spider-Man 2 isn't really terrible. It has some problems, but it's not terrible. The other movie that it most resembles might be Spider-Man 3, actually, which is unfortunate because Spider-Man 3 is the worst of the 5 movies, easily, in my opinion. But ASM 2 is definitely better because it has a lot fewer terrible scenes.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of really good scenes, a lot of really good scenes that would belong in a really good Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Which this isn't necessarily. And the only problem is that all those great scenes don't necessarily hang together very good.
I mean, one of the things is, some of the greatest superhero sequels. You got X-Men 2, you got Spider-Man 2, and you got even The Dark Knight, all of which were followed by less well-constructed third installments.
Yeah.
But all 3 of those sequels were so good because they were able to build very naturally out of the foundation of their first films.
Which were all origins?
Yeah, which were all origins. I mean, X-Men, the origin is quite different from the normal superhero movie, but still, they were able to continue the story naturally, but when all 3 of them got to the third one, they kind of had to, cap off the trilogy. This is what a lot of them run into.
Yeah.
So they had to, check off more of the boxes, even though those really should not all be crammed in the same film.
Yeah, I mean, especially because these are superhero movies, and superhero movies aren't supposed to end. They're continuous.
Yeah, yeah.
So just doing a movie that, is trying to cap everything off feels a little unnatural. I wouldn't have minded if The Dark Knight Rises ended with just, don't worry, Batman will always be around to protect Gotham, but that's not really what we get.
Yeah, we had to do the end story, but I was like, well, we still haven't gotten to Catwoman, we haven't gotten to the Bat plane or whatever it is, and some other stuff.
Yes,
but and then with X-Men, it was like I don't know. We'll get back to that when we cover Days of Future Past. But another problem is that it's tonally all over the place.
Yes.
And we start with the flashback to the Parkers and the plane, and it's this straight out of the Bourne Identity.
We didn't need all that.
Yeah.
It's a whole subplot, which is probably going to run through. It ran through the first movie and is in this movie, and it's probably going to be in the next movie, tying the whole thing together. It is having to do with Peter's parents, mainly Richard, and that's one of the weakest parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Because it's we don't need this. Peter's parents are barely in the comics, and the only reason they use them here is because they didn't use them in the Raimi movies.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the idea of Spider-Man or Peter Parker as time goes on deciding to use his powers to maybe investigate what happened to them, but it was never really a necessary part of his story, and it was also there to kind of spice up this version of events where now it's this part conspiracy thriller. And after we're done with this big fight on the plane, and we cut to this kind of more Tim Burton-esque chase through the streets with Spider-Man grabbing up all the I'm going to say cans of ISO 8 because we've been playing Avengers Alliance. But and fighting Paul Giamatti, who's totally wasted here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so we get a very thrilling and overdrawn action scene that has very little to do with the rest of the movie, and then we open with our Spider-Man action sequence. They really should have just opened with the Spider-Man chase.
Yeah, different movie. That would have been such a cool way to open things with him doing that big fall.
Yeah, just jump right into that. We don't even need opening credits or anything.
Yeah. But
and so something just occurred to me. This thing with Peter's parents. I don't know if it makes great trilogy fodder. I might like it better if they could have used that for Spider-Man 3, right? That would have been a good subplot instead of having to revisit the origin again and tie it back to that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because by then that's because there's a lot of in the Raimi movies. There's a lot of the movies repeating themselves. Yeah, and that would have been a great way to avoid that.
Yeah, all of the Spider-Man movies, including this one, except for Spider-Man 2, end with a funeral.
Yes.
But
it's really, but any Spider-Man 2 ends with a supervillain death.
Yeah,
because we're making movies here instead of say a primetime series. Every movie we have to hit one of the big dramatic points of Peter Parker's life, which kind of is repetitive and it makes Spider-Man seem a lot more depressing.
Yeah,
which I don't think you should be.
Mm-hmm. But that's another sort of the messed up tones over here is. I don't know, we got the Jamie Foxx stuff with Electro, which, as many people have said, it's like I'm a Riddler and Batman Forever.
Yeah.
The exact same character, but now Jamie Foxx is playing it.
Yeah.
And then we got the corporate stuff with Harry Osborn. Mm-hmm. And there's not like a creative through line there.
Yeah, it is
or a thematic through line.
It is a lot of things smashed together. Now, like I said, a lot of the individual scenes are pretty good. There's a lot. Of course, one of the best things in the movie is any of the scenes with Peter and Gwen, which is so nice because all their scenes together feel so much more natural than Peter and MJ in the Raimi movies, which are just stilted and weird and like Smallville-esque.
Yeah, that was
just not fun.
That's one of the things that really annoyed me in Spider-Man 3 is is it possible that we can have one movie where Spider-Man and his girlfriend don't break up? Can they just be together for the whole thing? And the answer is no, because these are movies. That story has to have some kind of arc to it every time.
But it's the same arc, but not the same arc every time.
Yeah. One example of the Vampire Diaries, where we have a bunch of different relationships going on and off all the time, and even though it can occasionally get repetitive, there are sort of more peaks and valleys there and more time for us to sort of enjoy these people just being together and existing as a couple.
Yeah,
I am breaking up all the time.
I am kind of impressed with, after 5 seasons, how many different variations, which don't feel too forced most of the time, that the writers have found for having Elena waffling between Damon and Stefan. Yeah. And I would love to write a scene where she just, kind of reflects on this. It's what if I'm cursed? What if this is my curse, to never be settled with either of these guys?
Yeah. One of the things I did really like in the movie was Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn. And it's one of those things where it's a shame that it has to be in this movie where stuff doesn't fit together very well. Yeah, one of the things that doesn't fit together is his scenes with Peter, which again are not poorly written, but we're told that they haven't seen each other in 9 or 10 years since they were preteens, and now Peter is just graduating, which means he's 18, and they're supposed to be best friends, but they're not best friends. They haven't seen each other for most of their lives. Yeah. Okay, it's if they hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, then it would make more sense. But at the same time, Peter was obsessed with Norman Osborn and Osborn Industries in the first movie, and he never said anything about Harry. So it just doesn't all quite fit. And this is, I think it speaks to. And I'm still waiting for. We're starting to get this with Arrow and The Flash on the CW of getting actual primetime shows that are just straight adaptations of superhero stories, as opposed to movies where you have to plan for 2 hours worth of story every 3 years, and things kind of get mixed up when you have that much time for that little.
we have that much time in between that little real estate for story. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's something like what we have in the X-Men movies, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah, and with the Harry Osborn here, even though the story he was in was kind of crap, Dan DeHaan really sells it. He's he really sells the emotional ups and downs of this guy, who's having to take on all his responsibilities, and he's dying and stuff. And I actually really liked when he goes in and sort of teams up with Electro, even though it is the very sort of standard, let's team up because we both hate Spider-Man. But I really liked, when Electro sneers that he should just kill him, and Harry's like, "Come on, man, you gotta think bigger."
Yeah,
he's really eating it up. Like it goes like a.
That's a very Harry thing to say.
Yeah, yeah. He it goes on a lot of different points, but DeHaan manages to make it all feel like it could be the same guy the whole time.
Yeah. Also, the story does feel rushed because you got to get to that, that ending there.
And let's talk about that ending, man. That's what.
So here's what really it kind of bothered me. Now, this movie was advertised as having 3 big Spider-Man supervillains in it, which is another thing it has in common with Spider-Man 3. Yeah. And when you watch the movie, you find that that's a kind of false advertising. Because, first of all, we have Rhino, who we meet Paul Giamatti in the opening action sequence, who is, again, wasted. And then we see, and we're getting into spoilers here, we see him at the very end in his full Rhino armor, but, like, the bit with the sewer cover you see in every single trailer on Earth, that's the last shot of the movie, and then we don't get to see the full fight. So Rhino's barely in the movie. He's about as in, imagine if they had advertised Captain America the Winter Soldier and put Batroc the Leaper on every poster. Okay, that's what that's like. Batroc's not really a part of that movie.
Yeah.
He's in it, but,
he's got really one fight scene and that's it, and that's...
Which was fine. I love that. Yeah. I love that, there's nothing wrong with using a minor villain just to fill out an action scene.
A minor villain in a minor role, yeah.
I wish they would do that more often.
Yeah.
But they try to convince you that, Rhino is going to be one of the main villains. No, he's not. The main villain in the movie is Electro, and, most of the action and most of the story is built around, the fights with Electro.
Yeah, and then, it actually builds up, pretty good up to the big final fight with Electro.
And then everything starts piling up.
Yeah. And then, so, like, once they defeat Electro, the movie's over, and then the ending of the next movie gets slammed in at the end of this when Harry shows up, so we can have another fight scene at the same time.
Yeah, and that's also that we can do the death of Gwen Stacy. Now, to play devil's advocate for a second about Gwen, this is, I think, the first time, not just in the movies, but I don't think any TV show has done the death of Gwen Stacy either. It's not in any of the cartoons. Usually they just don't use Gwen on the cartoons at all.
Yeah, and with Spectacular Spider-Man, they just didn't get that far.
Yeah, it wasn't on long enough. They probably would have gotten to it, but it wasn't on long enough.
Yeah.
So they didn't get to it there either. And so they finally made a movie where they actually did that story. They just didn't, but it just had to be this movie. I mean, they really could have done Gwen's death in Amazing Spider-Man 3. That would have felt more natural there.
Yeah.
Because they defeat Electro, they save the city, the movie's over, let's go home.
Yeah.
But then they gotta get Harry as a Goblin in there because they advertised Harry as a Green Goblin in there.
The death of Gwen Stacy is this big, iconic, important Spider-Man moment, and we've had 5 movies. We gotta get it in.
Yeah. The whole thing. It just feels rushed and kind of sloppy.
Checking the boxes off we need to have this in the movies.
And there's that recurring thing here. The whole action scene, the fight with the Goblin and Gwen's death, is well shot, and it's a pretty intense scene, and it's a good scene in a stuffed into a movie with a bunch of good scenes that don't hang together.
Yeah. So
and then another thing that really bothered me is when Harry shows up. After they've beaten Electro, Harry shows up as the Goblin to fight Spider-Man. And I keep seeing that in different superhero movies, and it bugs the shit out of me.
In Iron Man 2
exactly, when Whiplash, rockets in to have a fight with Iron Man and War Machine. And that just bothers me because it's such a rushed and ridiculous way to get to the action scene. The villain doesn't have to chase down the hero to have a fight. It should be the other way around. The villain should be doing something, threatening somebody, trying to, take over the city, and then the hero's got to show up and stop him. That works for me.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have, devised a whole thing where it's...
Even Spider-Man 3 managed to do that.
Yeah. Just the Spider-Man 3 is terrible, but...
Yeah.
But you get the idea. And I wouldn't mind it if they could have devised a whole thing where, Electro's doing what he's doing in the movie at the power plant here, and then Peter knows that Harry's doing something or other over there, but he's got to pick, what's the bigger threat right now, so he's got to take care of that, and then, I don't know, slingshot over there to fight Harry or something.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like, for all the flack we give Spider-Man 3, I think it handled its 3 villains better than Amazing 2 did.
I'm not so sure about that, but I mean...
Slightly, but I don't know.
In Spider-Man 3, they just have to slam the brakes on each storyline so they can let the other one go. And ASM 2 is a little different than that. I don't necessarily think they handled one better than the other. It's just that ASM 2 really only has 2 villains.
Yeah.
Rhino's just, thrown in there.
It's frustrating because, there's so much good here and so much talent going on, and then there's this other stuff that drags it down because, the studio wants this stuff, and this story is not really made to fill out a series of movies. Mm-hmm. So we have to cram it in very unnatural ways.
And plus there's the fact that, Avengers was so popular, and now every superhero franchise has to be Avengers. Now they're trying to partly use this movie to build up to the Sinister Six movie, which is why we had that scene in the vault with all the supervillain gadgets on display. That's where the Goblin armor comes in. Yeah.
And also it's how, Oscorp is now behind every bad thing ever.
Spectacular Spider-Man kind of did that. Maybe not every bad thing, but they did it a little smoothly. And I mean, Oscorp wasn't behind the Lizard on Spectacular Spider-Man.
Or Electro.
Yeah. That was an accident.
Yeah. And then there was the other thing you were pissed about with...
Right, there was... in the middle of the movie, they built this whole thing of, Harry is getting sick. He's getting sick, really fast for some reason, even though we see Norman, played by Chris Cooper, die at the beginning of the movie, and he looked pretty old. But now Harry just learned that he's sick with the same thing, and he's going to die, really, really fast for some reason. Yeah. Anyway, So Harry figures out that if he can get his hands on Spider-Man's blood, and this kind of plays into the subplot with what Richard was doing with his work, if he can get his hands on Spider-Man's blood, he may be able to cure himself with it. So he tries to get Peter to, because he takes pictures of the guy. He's the only connection. Tries to get Peter to see if he can get Spider-Man to meet with him and give him his blood. And at first Peter's reluctant. Now we're never told explicitly why Peter is reluctant. I mean, it's his best friend. If this could save his life, it seems like go for it. But anyway, Peter's like, I'll see what I can do. So finally, he dresses up as Spider-Man and goes right to Harry's place to talk to him. But he still won't give Harry his blood. But he won't say why.
Yeah, just tells him no. And
then he leaves.
Yeah, what could happen, yeah.
So it's like, the only explanation I can figure is that he saw the Raimi movies and knows that if he does the wrong thing, then it'll turn Harry into a supervillain. Which he turns into a supervillain anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was hoping for him to say something like, okay, look, I will give you my blood, but, not here. I'm not just going to, draw it out for you right here. Oh, we'll set it up. But you have to promise me something. You have to promise me you're going to test it. Don't just, inject it in yourself or drink it right on the spot or anything like that. You have to test it and see if it'll actually work. But he doesn't do that. I want him to I wanted Spidey to set up a whole thing where he, where he goes to his basement and draws out 6 vials and leaves them on a rooftop. Calls up Harry on a burner phone and you're like, hey, I left him on a rooftop with a bank account number. You put in however much money you think that blood is worth to you. That's what I would have had to do. Not that he would do it because Peter's terrible with money, but that seemed a lot more logical to me.
The other thing that pissed me off was the the Jameson cameo, if you can call it that, is they mentioned that he's doing stuff with the Bugle, which we never see, and we get one little email note from Jameson, and that's it. It's like, if you're only gonna do a little nod to it, then why even bother? I mean, it's such an essential part of the Spider-Man world, but we just don't have time for it in this movie. But I want to be able to check off that box, so throw a little nod to it in there.
It just occurred to me that in the first movie, when the Goblin is interrogating Jameson, he said, "I don't know, his stuff comes in the mail," which they do on Spectacular Spider-Man as well.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, this time his stuff really does come in the mail. Yeah. Peter never meets with Jameson, not on screen anyway. That's the only way. But it's indicative of why it's doing a remake this quickly is so problematic, because how do you recast J.K. Simmons as Jameson? You can't, so they didn't even bother.
Yeah.
But we were not to have Jameson in the movie somehow, so that's why they did it.
Yeah. I'm kind of not sure what I want to see in Spider-Man on film now, because I'm kind of over it. I feel like Spider-Man is just about gone as far as it can on film, and the rest is just going to be a mess no matter what we do. But I guess we'll see.
I gotta say, Andrew Garfield is really good.
Yeah,
as Peter and Spidey. And one thing I noticed is that this movie managed to get around something that has plagued all the other Spider-Man movies, including Amazing Spider-Man 1, which is we finally have a movie where we don't have Spider-Man whipping his mask off every 5 minutes. And part of that is because we actually have Spider-Man, talking and cracking jokes.
Yeah.
While he's Spider-Man, so we don't.
So that we know he's under there.
Yeah. And it's. You may not notice it, but it is just, once it occurred to me, it was really nice.
Yeah. Besides what happens next for Spider-Man, I'm also dreading that this is basically what we're going to get with Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
They're trying
too many movies at once,
and cram too many movies worth of stuff into one big thing.
We can all feel it happening. Every time there's another news update.
Because that's what they think we want now, because Avengers made so much, but that's not really what Avengers did. It earned that it was one pretty simple story, and it earned the ability to use everything that it did. Dawn of Justice hasn't really earned that. I feel. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So I think that's all we have to say about Amazing Spider-Man. Next up, X-Men Days of Future Past.